Nathan said. Say it. Hello. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. As you come on, please mute yourself and just drop in the chat, where in the world are you? Where are you? And where are you on your journey? Are you a mama? Are you pregnant? Are you a dad? Are you working towards pregnancy? It really helps us to know who's here.
Hello.
Hey, everyone. I wasn't not just talking for 3 minutes on mute. Yeah, I was. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. If you can, as you enter, just mute yourself if you're not already muted, and just drop in the chat, where are you in the world, as you're already doing, and where are you on your journey? Are you a mother? Are you a father of 1, of 5? Oh, I wasn't muted. I wasn't? So now I'm repeating myself. So weird. On my screen, it said I was muted. Okay, great. Yeah, sometimes we have like 10 or 20 people, but then 15 of them are pregnant. So we really have like 45 people in the room. I really like to know those things. Yeah, welcome. We're really, really excited about this panel, as we've been calling it. And I am so honored to have the opportunity to shine a light on these 3 amazing, beautiful fathers. And not only fathers, we have Dr. Thomas Burney with us today, who is a great grandfather. And in my years of supporting mamas and daddies on their transformative journeys into birth, I've recognized something in particular when I'm supporting dads. And that is that oftentimes when a man is becoming a father, and that could be for the first, second, third, ninth, 10th time, every time it must transform you, yeah? He often is the initiate, and he also must be the elder. And that's really quite devastating, because we all innately deserve a lot of love and a lot of support as we go through these transformative times of our lives. And unfortunately, men have much or a lot fewer examples of elders and guides to turn to. So it's really an honor to have you here, Thomas. So I'm just going to introduce myself, and I don't want to spend too much time talking. I really want to turn the spotlight over to Nathan and David and Thomas. But welcome, everyone. For those of you who are watching now or in the future, we are so, so happy to have you all here. So I'm Victoria Rose, and I was born on unceded traditional Mi'kmaq territory, now known as one of Canada's Eastern Maritime Provinces, Nova Scotia. From the time I let my mother know I was ready to the time I lay in her arms was about 2 hours. A lot happened in that short amount of time. I was just telling Dr. Burney that my dad drove into the ditch on the way to the hospital. I'm a rememberer. I have very vivid memories of my own birth and pre-birth experiences. Among many, one of my fondest is experiencing my father's smile as I was traversing through the birth channel. I was fully engaged, unmedicated, and my instincts were firing rapidly with both excitement and trepidation. And then I felt, saw, heard, tasted my father's smile. His smile filled the entire room. His happiness bathed my mother with hormones of joy, love, and excitement. And that's the wave I came in on. His love, his smile carried me in. My father died when I was just 2 years old. And as you might imagine or even relate to, a lot of core misunderstandings get set up in a little girl who endures such loss. Come to discover, though, through a lot of healing and through the thousands of individuals I've had the privilege of working with over the years, that many people's fathers who didn't die young, or many people whose fathers didn't die young, still grew up fatherless without their fathers present. This to me is tragic. And it's a reality that I really believe that all of us who are here today are committed to turning around. A couple other things about myself. I have an unforgotten ability to effectively communicate with babies, both born and unborn, and even preconceived souls. I believe this is true for everyone if we merely remember what it is to truly listen. At 21 years old, I had a near-death experience. What could have been a fatal car crash was rather the supreme opportunity to make two very important decisions. The first was whether or not to live, and the second was what I chose, which was to come fully alive, to incarnate. Shortly after that, life propelled me into the Amazon jungle of Peru, where I crazily spent extensive periods of time over a number of years, studying, apprenticing, learning, healing, remembering within the ancient Shipibo tradition. And I really consider the Shipibos as some of the original custodians of health, the original pharmacists, skilled doctors. Through witnessing thousands of people get well through these traditional healing methods, I became intimately more aware of the depth of our cultural wound of separation, which begins often before conception, is definitely magnified through parental outsourcing of power during pregnancy. And of course, we know the all too common infant maternal separation at birth. My work with the plants prepared me for my training in pre and perinatal psychology and health, and then extensive apprenticeships with especially one of my great elders and mentors, Barbara Essman, co-founder and director of the Sacred Birthing School in Hawaii. And over the years, I've really honed my abilities to safely guide adults back to revisit and rewrite their own birth and pre-birth experiences. It's a very delicate and intricate work that can be done whether you have access to the stories or not. I've been delivering a birth preparation program over the last 5 years called Transform into Birth, which was really conceived from my knowing of what babies need at and before they are born. The program is different than anything I'm aware of that's out there. And for 4 main reasons, it prioritizes the healing of parents' own birth, pre-birth, conception, and preconception experiences. It includes the unborn baby, not only as a conscious participant, but as the main expert in pregnancy and birth. It extends profound support to fathers, and it also brings in really deep awareness for the relationship dynamics of the couple who are ultimately transforming from ordinary humans into parents. So yeah, this program is now reborn, and this event is partially celebrating that. Definitely having these amazing fathers with us today who are going to share their experiences from fathering and also serving thousands of people over the years who are getting born into parents. Nathan and David are both contributing to what is now an online virtual library. Past 5 years, I've been delivering the birth preparation series solo, live, very huge investment of my time and my heart. But now we have an elaborate, in-depth virtual library of classes to which I've brought in others, particularly men. We have an incredible section dedicated to the dads, other birth luminaries like Dr. Sarah Buckley, Barbara Essman, and other elders. So if you want to learn more about that, all you need to do is book a connection call with me. So we will put that in. I'm happy to chat about it with you. And now, without further ado, I get to introduce the real stars here, our three honorable panelists for today's discussion, which is centered on the men's role in pregnancy and birth. I just want to take that title in, yeah. There's few things that we can talk about that really create impact and have enormous potential to fuel change. And this is one that I believe really holds a lot of power. I asked Dr. Thomas Verney's permission to shrink down his bio because it would take me a very long time to read his full biography, and I really want to give him more time to speak. But I do feel these acknowledgements are important in that you can really have a sense of who you are sitting with today. So Thomas Verney is a psychiatrist, academic, and award-winning author, known as a world-leading authority on the effects of the prenatal and early postnatal environment on personality development. He's written 8 books, including The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, and more recently, The Embodied Mind. Highly recommend both of them. He's contributed to 47 scientific papers. Verney has taught at notable institutions such as Harvard University, York University, the University of Toronto, St. Mary's University in Minneapolis, and the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute. He founded the Pre- and Perinatal Psychology Association of North America in 1983, significantly impacting the field over many decades now. He retired from active practice in 2014 and now lives with his wife in Stratford, Canada. In 2022, he was inducted into the Hall of Honor of the Prenatal Sciences Research Institute, Sophia. And we also have Nathan Riley. Nathan Riley is a home birth doctor and holistic gynecologist living in Louisville, Kentucky. He received his MD from Temple University, completed his OBGYN residency at Kaiser in Los Angeles, and completed his fellowship in hospice and palliative care at UC San Diego. He's dual board certified in allopathic medicine and brings in tools from other modalities like functional medicine and nutrition, exercise science, anthroposophic medicine, lifestyle coaching, and midwifery to optimize the care of his clients. He advocates for and supports out-of-hospital birth, along with upholding the midwifery model of care, which he believes could and should be the default birthing option for 85% or more of women in the United States. Nathan is married to his high school sweetheart, and they have 2 beautiful little girls, the second of whom was born at home. He made every mistake in the books and the births of his own children, and now coaches families and fathers using storytelling, education, and community in his Born Free method community. He explores the less measurable, less mechanical aspects of childbirth from preconception through postpartum on his podcast, The Holistic OBGYN. Highly, highly recommend. And last but definitely not least, we have David Arel. He's an author, entrepreneur, consultant, and coach with a passion for supporting people as they strive to create greater clarity and alignment of inner values and outer expression. David's focus on deeper authenticity and richer relationships helps his clients to thrive in today's complex landscape of overlapping career, partnership, and parenting challenges. His most recent work, the book Welcome to Fatherhood, The Modern Man's Guide to Pregnancy, Childbirth, and Fatherhood, humorously referred to as simply WTF, is specifically tailored to encourage and support men as they grow into fatherhood. In addition to WTF, David is also the founder and co-host of Baby Talk with Katie and David, a podcast dedicated to supporting the pregnancy to early parenthood journey. He currently lives in North Virginia with his wife, Jennifer, 2 young children, Justin and Dottie, and their chocolate lab, Johnny Biscuits. So welcome, everyone, and thank you all Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be here. This conversation can be approached from so many different angles. It feels bottomless in terms of the depth that we can go, and it feels like the sky is the limit in terms of the potential stuff. So yeah, Dr. Verney, Nathan, David, everyone here. We know very well by now that human development begins long before conception. Epigenetics does this, and all of pre and perinatal sciences really confirm this. And I say pre and perinatal sciences, which is like a whole incredible, vast library that spans decades on pre and perinatal science and human development that is oddly not included in med school and the conventional post-Freudian psychological models. So yeah, it's really something special, yeah. And yeah, the other beautiful thing about these fields is that they also show us that it's never too late to heal. So we know that our development begins long before conception, but we also know, hey, it's also not ever too late to heal. And we know well by now that a mother's thoughts, her feelings, all of her experiences inform the psycho, neuro, immuno, endocrine development of her baby. We know that all the influences around her and all the energies around her inform her feelings, which then directly bathe her growing baby. So that means, yeah, all of their core beliefs about who they are and how they are in the world. And I'd have to say that Nathan, David, Thomas, and I, we all probably share the common belief that a woman innately knows how to give birth. And if she's surrounded in people and energies that believe in her and are not afraid of birth, it typically goes well. So what would you guys say? And we'll start with you, Nathan. We're going to do around the circle style. We'll start with Nathan. You can talk for 5 or so minutes, and then we'll just pass it on to David, go to Thomas. What would you guys say is missing in terms of the man's understanding in his role? I think for a lot of men, they don't understand that they're not yet completely aware of how much influence they have on the development of their growing baby and how they inform mom and her feelings 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, typically. So we'll just start at like, yeah, what's missing here? And then as we go through the conversation, we'll look at, yeah, what can we do? Where are we heading? Yeah, so Nathan, just give it over to you.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Well, I think a lot of people who know me know that I'm pretty conflicted, let's just say, about the Western medical model of doing everything. I think that we've kind of missed the mark. We've kind of hit a dead end in many ways. And yeah, we can keep doing more data and more studies and all of that, but that's still kind of perpetuating this notion that there's a mechanical process here and that pregnancy is a medical procedure or birth is a medical procedure, pregnancy is a disease. And if we can just get the data, we're going to get, out of the weeds. And of course, nobody who has a birth with me, if I were to ask them about their birth, they're not going to tell me about their vital signs or their blood loss or their heart rate or whatever. They're going to tell me something that sounds a little bit less measurable, the mental, the emotional, maybe even spiritual aspects of this process. And the men, of course, we come into this conversation, many of us sort of with this notion that there's a problem there to fix. And if we can just advocate or have the information or be big and strong and supportive that everything's going to go well. But I want people to sort of forget about that because, while we've been using the word role, I'd rather people reframe this as what is the opportunity for a man in childbirth. And as Victoria mentioned in my bio, I feel like I made every mistake in the world in our birth. And so as a very, very short little anecdote, my wife has always felt like I'm kind of the one in charge. You know, like I do more reading, I know more of the data, I know all these things, I've got all the credentials. So in our pregnancies, I wanted to get out of the way, but I got out of the way. I backpedaled so much that I actually made her feel like I was completely disconnected. And that's when I say I made every mistake in the book, because my opportunity there, not my role, my opportunity there is to connect with my partner in order for her to feel safe, right? There's nothing safe about childbirth. We can unpack that if you wish. But I'm not talking about physical safety. I'm talking about how does her nervous system experience this birth sort of unfolding. And the opportunity is there for me to flex my masculinity and really test my masculinity by playing the role of a mountain, an anchor point for her to know that I have got you if something were to change. I've got you if you have doubts. I've got you if you become afraid. I've got you if you become worried or if you need some extra hand holding. But it's not my job to fix a problem. There's this series of books that's circulating, not related to fatherhood necessarily, but it's called Conscious Stories. You've probably seen the ads on Instagram. I ordered the whole set because I really liked one of the books that somebody had gifted me. And there's this book called The Dad Who Didn't Know. And the whole story is that this dad is worried about everything in his job and his family life. He needs to have the answer to everything. And meanwhile, his little boy's out picking flowers, his little girl's dancing, and his wife is reading and meditating. And he's just sitting there worried about everything. This is the modern archetype of a man, is that it's our job to know the answer to everything and to fix it. But I think that the big piece that's missing in this pregnancy conversation is that there is actually not a role for you. There's an opportunity for you. I'm not contradicting what Victoria said. I'm trying to expand on that. There's an opportunity there for you to be the most masculine version of yourself. And the prerequisite is that you can't approach this experience as if there is a problem fix. And when we only rely on the measurable, the physical, the data, what does this study show? What expert is going to say the next big thing about breastfeeding? Who gives a shit? That's not your job anymore. Your job is to make your partner feel loved and seen and bear witness to the immense power of the feminine. That is the job, the role, the opportunity of the masculine in childbirth. And I think that's what's really missing from the conversation. Should I keep
Yeah.
going?
Yeah, you can go ahead, David. Yeah.
Sure. No, thank you, Nathan. That's a great unpacking of speaking to the bigger question there. Because as I was sitting with this question, what's missing from men's understanding of their role, I was basically thinking pretty much everything. Like the short list is what's present and helpful, and I love how your response to what's the opportunity speaks directly to that. What is present and what is helpful is that opportunity. My experience of beginning my journey into fatherhood was like so many of us modern guys was, coming home one day and seeing that positive pregnancy test and being like, oh, cool. I'm going to be a dad later. That's going to be awesome. Um, and I feel from that moment on, I was perpetually playing catch up. Like I didn't realize it, but I had found myself, I woke up on a raft in the middle of a river that was moving quickly, and I thought I was still on the shore. And I kept being surprised at each and every turn as things came along. And as I, sort of desperately sought guidance from the larger culture, I kept getting these terribly unhelpful answers. I talk about my work all the time of, oh, just be helpful and supportive. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I'm standing here, like, I'm not growing a baby. Like, I have you've given me zero helpful information by telling me that. And so, um, everything is missing. The cultural framework of what is healthy masculine, the cultural framework of ritual and rites of passage, cultural framework of initiation into fatherhood, the cultural framework of a powerful mythos that informs and enables both men and women to grow into adulthood, parenthood, with this sacred center of becoming parents and bringing children into the world and raising them as everything's missing there. And so for my work, I kind of started right in the trenches of what is exactly happening for people that were as confused and uncertain and frustrated with the lack of helpful guidance from the culture for how to show up, how to be helpful and supportive. And agreeing with Nathan, the opportunity, this is not a fix. There's not and it is about better connecting with your partner and being better prepared for what's coming ahead. And so many of the guys that I connect with, especially when it comes to labor and delivery, they're sort of thrust into this place of, you need to watch the room, or you need to be doing all these things. And it's like, I'm going to find myself accidentally cursing because I'm from Philly and it's sort of the salt and pepper of language. So I'm trying to hold back, but like, what the bleep am I supposed to know? Like, I'm not trained. You wouldn't throw me into the dental office and tell me to like intervene with the dentist as they're like doing a root canal. Like, well, that's the last thing I need to do. And so, again, agreeing with Nathan's great framing of opportunity, the opportunity there is to be present, is to be attentive, is to be calm and co-regulate and be a calming influence. And only after being fully grounded in attentiveness and calmness can you then be competent if and as the circumstances arise. One of my favorite tips in my work is dad tip number 7, dude, hire a doula. Work with your doula, take guidance from your doula, be competent in being part of that birth team within your role, primarily of being attentive and calm for your partner. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this conversation goes. A lot of my work is focused on kind of meeting those dads that are lost in the woods, giving them what I call dad tips and big ideas to help ground them, meet them where they are in their confusion, in their uncertainty, in their sort of swirling lack of cultural support, especially for those dads who really want to be a great partner, really want to be a great teammate, really want to show up and be a great dad. Meet them where they are and give them some little, a hand up, some guidance, some little specific, immediately relevant things that they can do right away. So I'm looking forward to getting into the later stages of this conversation when it comes to the practical components. But thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this conversation goes.
Amazing, David. And yeah, I'm so looking forward to feeling and seeing, discovering where this goes as well. And as we shift over to you, Dr. Verney, I just had to take the opportunity to actually really shine the light on the power and beauty of the constellation here. Thomas has dedicated his entire life, more than half a century, to really put down the foundation that people like Nathan and David and I and any birth worker really that are committed to bringing us in the forward direction now walk upon. Thomas was one of the first people to publish that smoking and drinking alcohol in pregnancy was a bad thing. It is not a good idea. To which he got huge pushback from doctors and obstetricians saying, "You're crazy, Dr. Verney. Drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes in pregnancy is good." So yeah, again, if you haven't read this treasure, it must be part of your library. And among his other books, Thomas, in my understanding, and I know you touch on this in your books and in your work, birth is physiologically designed to create a family system that thrives in health, in co-regulation, lifelong. So could you, as you build upon what Nathan and David have laid down here, could you also touch on this concept of co-regulation, mom and dad, the sanctuary that's getting set up that will continue even after birth?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. I like what David said about meeting the men on their own ground. I think that we have to remember that men are not a homogeneous entity. You know, when we talk about what's wrong with men or what is missing in their lives, it's really doesn't make very much sense, that question, because each man is different, and to generalize to all men seems kind of ridiculous. I think that what is important, as you have said just a few minutes ago, as David has said, you know, you have to find out from each future father, you know, what their fantasies are, what their expectations are about having a child. Very often, the fantasies of the father are very different from the fantasies of the mother, and they don't find this out until the child is born. The father is looking for a kid that he can play baseball with. The mother is looking perhaps for a daughter that she can show how to sew or how to dress or whatever. They may have very different expectations. So it is very important in terms of creating a well-functioning, harmonious family to make sure that the expectations of the future father and the future mother really meet, that they are not too different. I think that what is so very important is to emphasize to mothers and fathers that the child really begins to develop not only physically, but also emotionally, psychologically, from the moment of conception on. And in fact, even what happens before conception, research shows us, is incredibly important. And we can talk about that later if we have the time. But such things as a stressed father or a smoking father a smoking future father, even before conception, is going to affect the health and the psychological development of the child. So those things need to be kept in mind. And the importance of relating to that child who is a thinking and feeling and remembering being from very early on is incredibly important. And I would just like to tell you an anecdote, and then I will stop. I was being interviewed by a lady from California the other day, and she told me that during her first pregnancy, her husband was never home because he was studying medicine, which I'm sure Nathan can sympathize with. And so during her second pregnancy, it seems that he had finished his studies, and every night he would speak to my unborn child. And I said, what would he say? And she said, oh, you know, just about the weather and what we had for dinner. And then he would close all his conversations with, good night, Junior. Talk to you tomorrow. When this child was born, this woman told me, he walked into the room, into the birthing room, and he came close to me as I was holding my child on my breast. And he said, hi, Junior. And my son just looked at him, and he gave him this beautiful smile of recognition, like there was simply no doubt at all that this child recognized my husband, his father. Now, P.S., and why this is so important. She said to me, now it is 4 years later, and the relationship between my husband and the second child is so much better than the relationship he has with the first child. And I'm sure it is because of prenatal bonding. So I leave that with you, and we'll continue.
Oh, wow, that's such a powerful share. And wow, yeah, the prenatal bonding, I think it's so common that I can imagine I don't live in a man's body, but I can imagine for you men who, do not grow the baby inside your body, often feel separate and outside of that. And how can you nurture that connection? And how can you contribute to the bonding of the baby? But there's so many stories like this, like what Thomas just shared. And I think our inquiries when it comes to prenatal development, like they always say, yeah, babies in the womb are very bored at what we're looking at and what we're trying to find. Like, oh, look, baby response. Well, yeah, obviously. They're a conscious, sentient being. And I believe that babies are way more conscious than we are as adults, way more aware and responsive. So yeah, dads, how can we just evoke that memory of just how influential you are to your baby as they're growing, how you can already begin to bond with your baby as they're growing in utero. And why is it important to do that during pregnancy? Why is it important to begin showing up in the pregnancy, not just using the pregnancy as some kind of waiting period? Why is that important, and how does that inform the way that you will show up at the time of birth? David, you touched on presence, which is so important, and that brings into question, well, what is actually dismantling your capacity for deep presence? So yeah, Nathan, do you want to speak to this? This can go so deep, so take your time and see where unpacking it takes you.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on a stage with giants here. I mean, what David and Dr. Verney have both shared is everything. I mean, that's pretty much it. And yet it's kind of easier said than done. Let me speak to something Dr. Verney had said, this notion that every man has the same sort of baggage they're bringing into the conversation is obviously not true. We're all very, very different people. A lot of us had great men in our life that modeled how to be, conscious, sensitive guys. I didn't have that. So for me, it was, going into medicine was probably driven by ego and wanting power and money and fame or whatever. And of course I left that, and I'm left with all the debt to prove it. Your ego kind of just gets blasted in residency, and you can choose to either through cognitive dissonance stick with that, or you can actually start to reframe this in a more personal way. And the one thing that I kind of wish that I would have been guided through when we were pregnant was something I do with couples now, even preconception in the Born Free community that you mentioned. I'll have both partners write up a mission statement, especially if they're struggling with fertility. We probably won't get into like spirit babies and whatnot here, but there's a lot of women, especially, who feel like there's a baby trying to come in. Why am I having miscarriages? Why is this not happening for us when it's happening seemingly for everybody? And as our fertility rates have been declining, there's a lot of frustration and whatnot there. And one of the exercises I have couples do is write up a mission statement. This gets directly into what Dr. Verney was talking about. And David, this is probably going to be relevant to your journey as well, because I was the same way. I get the pregnancy test and it's like, holy shit, I'm going to be a dad. And I've attended a lot of births, but I've never been on this side of the coin. And the mission statement exercise is really interesting. You really want to try and understand what is important to you as a person. Why do you want to become a father? Why do you want to become a mother? And what invariably happens, not always, I won't say 100% invariably, but most of the time, is the men will write a little tiny paragraph and the women will write 6 pages. And that's because perhaps there's probably a lot of reasons, but it's probably, something that has been on the mind of your female partner. Of course, we're talking about a very heterosexual male and female relationship here, but this goes for almost any couple. One person has probably been thinking about this for a long time and has a lot more apprehensions, a lot more fears and anxieties. Women who have been told you're not supposed to get pregnant. That is the worst thing that could happen to you from the age of 15 when you got your first period. And now they've got volumes to share. And the men are like, well, I guess I'm going to be a dad. Right. And so even before the conception happens, getting people to write a mission statement to really see what is the other person's kind of perception of this whole journey that we're about to go on. What does it mean to be a father? What kind of father do you want to be? I mean, write and write and write. and then share, and then write some more, and then share. And then I have them combine that into a mission statement, which ultimately is actually your birth plan. Forget about vitamin K and all that. That's easy to say yes or no to. But your birth plan is kind of like an advanced directive. You mentioned I'm a hospice and palliative care doctor. At the end of your life, I don't know what's important to you. I don't know what your values are, what your fears are. I don't know what existential dread you're experiencing. But if you have it all written up for me, it gives me a little glimpse into who you are. And that same process is so valuable in the preconception or even early pregnancy phase, or for those of you in the second or third trimester, start now. Because once you get to the hospital, it's a lot easier for us men, going back to what something David said, it's a lot easier for us to cash in on our primary currency, which no longer is our time or our knowledge or whatever. Our main currency now is presence. And that's not something many of us, men or women, have ever been incentivized to prioritize. Your little kids don't care how much time you spend with them. They care that you're present right there and there. And that can start, going back to what Dr. Verney said, in the womb. And beyond just talking and singing and touching, you can paint on the belly. Use a non-toxic paint. You're not going to go and get like some crappy Crayola with a yellow number 6 in it or whatever, but paint on the belly. Like, have fun, take a bath together, like really explore one another's bodies, because you're never going to get back. You're never going to get this moment back. And the baby will know. The baby has these super sensory abilities that go beyond just hearing dad's voice. But let's talk about dad's voice while I just have a few more minutes. Co-regulation came up. And I think this is if I could go back and reword what I had said, the number one thing that's lacking in this whole pregnancy and childbirth conversation is the role of co-regulation for establishing a healthy, safe, a safe sensing nervous system for this baby. So in the uterus, you're developing what's called, if you're familiar with polyvagal theory, you might be a little bit more aware of this, but it's not just a gas pedal and brake pedal. Perhaps the vagus nerve is actually doing more than this. It's more than just rest and digest. It's more than your flight or your freeze response, whereas sympathetic would be your flight and fight. Polyvagal would describe that there's actually a connection. Your facial muscles, everything is connected to the vagus nerve, and you can connect and make love and flow with another person when you're in that green safe zone. But the babies don't develop this ventral vagal component of their nervous system until at least 6 months after birth. So while the baby's in there, if we can create an environment where the baby is actually feeling, as a consequence of the mother's nervous system, which is plugged in here, that there's a safe space in here, this amniotic universe is safe. And then when the baby emerges afterwards, if we can keep that baby feeling safe, then that baby's going to have a lifelong better connections to self, experiencing safety around them. And how does co-regulation happen? It happens by not sticking needles in them, not the bright lights, not the cacophony of noise that happens in the modern medical system. It comes on your chest. And if you have a C-section, on dad's chest, because for the reasons Dr. Verney has described, that baby is going to know who you are if you've invested and been present throughout that entire 9.5-month period. And that voice is going to make them feel calm. It's going to make them feel safe. Contrast that with a baby that ends up in the NICU for sometimes improbable reasons. Oh, the baby's having a little trouble breathing. Let's take the baby to the NICU. Okay, that might be helpful, but does the baby feel safe? And polyvagal theory tells us that your feeling safe is way more important than the measures that are put in place to keep you safe. And babies don't know the difference. Babies just want to feel safe. And when they're in a low-lit, dimly lit room where mom and dad are gooing and guying and looking at the little fingers and smelling your hair, and you're this gooey mass just wrapped up in a blanket right on mom's chest, right between her breasts, that will help to establish that ventral vagal component of their nervous system, leading to a lifetime of feeling like the world is not something to be feared, but the world is actually a place where I can feel safe. And that starts happening in the uterus with the development of the nervous system of the baby. So all of this is kind of like unifying all of what we've talked about. But this is so critical for dads to appreciate, that you're actually helping that baby have a lifelong, optimal experience in life by just being present and helping them co-regulate from start to finish, even before the conception period.
Wow. Yes, yes, yes. Nathan, thank you. Thank you. You tied that all together so beautifully. I would like to actually hand it over to you, Thomas, because I can feel that you have also some things to add there.
Well, I totally agree with absolutely everything that Nathan said, and it was very moving. I moved by it. I moved by it. It's good to know that there are people like Nathan around. That's really reassuring for future generations. I'm glad. I'm glad he's around. I think that perhaps one of the things that we can help people with, future parents, is to recognize that men and women are different and that the differences are good. It's not something that you criticize. Rather, you should learn to appreciate. So by this, what I mean by this is that a lot of research shows that men in early childhood will play rough and tumble kinds of games with their children, which is incredibly important. I mean, I was just reading a research paper, I think it was from the University of Cambridge in England, about the role that playtime with dad benefits children's self-control. Children who have a chance to play with their dads will grow up much less aggressive. They will have much less attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, and they will be much better at controlling their aggression. It's all in the paper there. A lot of research has been done on the importance of fathers playing with their children. Of course, mothers provide much more emotional support to their children. And that is why, and many other reasons, that is why it is so important to have two parents, if at all possible. And I'm sorry, Victoria, that you lost your father, you said, when you were 2 years old. So I'm sure that you have some thoughts and feelings about that. But having a male and female energy, and Nathan at the beginning was talking a lot about masculinity, I think I think that those two energies are very different, and we need both of them. We need both. If we are going to raise healthy children, we need the masculine energy and we need the feminine energy. And one is not better or worse than the other. We have to appreciate that both, at their best, ideally, are important. So I think perhaps that's what I would say about what Nathan was saying.
Yeah. Mm. I say sometimes I didn't get enough dad jokes growing up. People need dad jokes. I take things, I've grown to not take things so seriously. But yeah, in my experiences and becoming more and more and more coherent with my own early history, luckily I had a very positive male figure in my life. Didn't live with us in our home, but has been an enormous, strong force in my life. So I'm very, very grateful for that. It's really helped to fuel my healing. And for anyone who's grown up without a father, I pray for that, for everyone, to have a positive example. But for dads to just remember, like, as a woman now who's in relationship to a man, there's so much unlearning and relearning that I can only do inside a relationship. And all of our pre and perinatal experiences are informing how we are in relation to all our relations. That masculine figure is so, so important. It informs our esteem, our confidence. And so know that as fathers, like, this is not a partial role. In a lot of ways, I think you have the most powerful role. I remember waking up one morning 1 year ago, weeping in tears. I could feel my babies that haven't even been conceived yet, like so close. And it just woke up feeling this enormous reverence for the masculine. It was epiphany. And I think that epiphany is its own thing. There's realization, there's awareness, and there's epiphany. Epiphany is like you become aware of it and you cannot undo that awareness. It's now part of you. And for me, what that epiphany was that I can say yes, I can journey to great heights to connect with the consciousness of those beings, but he, capital H, he brings them in. And it does not happen any other way. And in that morning, when I woke up weeping, it was like, thank you, thank you, thank you to my partner. Yeah, without you, my children don't come in. And I think we need to remember that, dads, without you, there is no creation. Life ceases to exist, no matter how conception takes place. An egg and a sperm are needed. It is so, so important. And you can bet that your baby not only benefits from you talking to them or painting on their mama's belly or making mama laugh and smile, making her feel beautiful and powerful and all the things. Like you can bet that it's not only influencing them in that moment, they remember. You know, as a culture, we've forgotten, but the forgetting is developmental. We don't innately forget. Our memories are meant to remain intact, and they didn't go anywhere. They just got chocked full of a bunch of very confusing experiences. We were treated by our authority. So we learned to forget, but the memory doesn't go anywhere. The memory might be more accurately defined as the way in which we experience the world. And more than that, the way we interpret our experiences. That is memory. So I'm going to bring it back down a little bit. And David, can you fill in some of these pieces? Like, you know, what, practically speaking, what can the men do to just also feel their purpose in pregnancy, feel, I have a role and it's very important. And these are the things that, And I read your whole book front to back and I'll read it again. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. You are genius with the way that, just absolutely brilliant what you did. Welcome to Fatherhood, Modern Man's Guide to Pregnancy, Birth, and Fatherhood. It's just brilliant the way you get the men involved. I love it. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, getting the men involved is a great titration of exactly all of that. A point that Nathan was making, I was translating it to my language of attention plus intention. And I want to speak to two of the challenges that I think a lot of modern men that I work with have faced that are in the way of them showing up with attention and intention. The first, and Nathan spoke to this about, a lot of us growing up as young people are sort of hammered with this, like, don't get pregnant message from our current culture, which makes a lot of sense given our current culture. We don't live in the way we used to live for the last 100,000 years or 500,000 years, however far you want to roll the clock back. Our modern world is very different and is very disconnected from our collective cultural history. So men and women and I sat in classes where the teacher was like, look, all of you, if you get pregnant tomorrow, your life will be ruined. We're all like 11th grade or whatever. And we all were like, yeah, no disagreement here. So there's this internalization of that message of don't get pregnant. I came into fatherhood late in my life, intentionally. But I would joke with my friends about how my wife and I we intentionally decided we were ready to have children. But I joked with my friends that I've spent a long time being very intentional about not getting pregnant, and it was requiring a substantial existential pivot to reorient my being, my energy to wanting to get pregnant. And I was lucky to be, through no skill or intelligence, pure luck and life circumstances, to be in a place where that's sort of what dawned on me. But I think a lot of men haven't been invited to be attentive to their unconscious opinion, orientation, perspective, et cetera, about what does pregnancy mean for them. And so they're still bringing this sort of unconscious terror, resistance, concern. And I love that Nathan spoke directly to that with this idea of sitting down and writing out your mission statement. A second thing that I want to spend a few minutes talking about, and this I encountered time and time again with the dads I was working with in one-on-one before, and some of the groups I was running before COVID. And I would ask them, and this became like one of my favorite sort of trick questions to get everybody to buy in to what was going to follow. And I would ask them to share what they were most excited about becoming a father. And I would listen, and you could just see the stories unfurling about, oh, going fishing or playing softball or riding a bike and all these things. And I would smile and smile, and I would nod. I'm like, okay, how old is your baby in these visions you have? And you would see them all sort of be like, oh, 3, 4, 5. And so I spoke to that in general terms as the dad instinct. And a lot of us guys, when we start to think about what we're going to do with our baby, we start with them being 3 magically. And so I talk about this, like, there's 1,000 days and nights before then. Like, don't even worry about that. Like, I'm talking about like now, like I'm catching most of these men when they're in the second trimester. I'm like, your baby's here now. Just like your partner, she'll tell you. And so I invite them to be paying attention to reality, which is their baby is here now. And then invite them to be intentional about how they engage with that reality. And I love both the story just my partner. One of my dad tips is to talk to mama and baby separately. Hey, dear, how is your day going? Oh, and baby, how are you feeling today? Like, having separate conversations when baby's in utero is a great way to start the reality of that separate relationship. Skin to skin is something I definitely recommend. Soon as baby's born, obviously allow that golden hour with really that mother baby bonding, but be present, be there. When appropriate, get your skin to skin. Let baby feel the vibration of your voice, chest to chest, because that's how they hear when they're in utero. Hearing is a vibratory phenomenon, but it's a felt sense even more so than it is through the ears, through the body. So feeling that, oh, this is the voice. Let them feel your scruff, get your vibe, get your energy. You're like imprinting upon father as primary caregiver also. All of these things. There's so, again, this back to your first question, what's missing? Everything. These are all like little threads that we could touch upon to weave into this new tapestry, this new version of an old tapestry of what does it mean to be intentional and engaged with all of our, not just roles, but opportunities, as Nathan said in the first answer, of what does it mean to show up as the healthy masculine? What does it mean to show up beyond just conception, and beyond, and from every point forward? What does it mean to be, fatherhood starts today with that positive pregnancy test, if not before, not when baby gets here later, and certainly not when they're 3 years old and you're going to put them on a tricycle with training wheels or whatever. So again, just to wrap up, attention plus intention can start today with their families in preconception, revisiting your approach to becoming pregnant and starting a family, and that intention into how you're managing your energies from that point forward, I think would go a long way.
Wow, I'm filled with so much gratitude that this conversation is happening. It's just, it's so incredible, you know, like just a second ago, Thomas was a big second ago writing about, yeah, smoking is not good during pregnancy. And I think, yeah, and now we're talking about, yeah, prenatal care, dad's participation and part in all of it. And yeah, some of the work that Nathan does with preconception, fertility, and myself as well, I have a fertility and preconception program. It's like already long before conception, we're starting to have these conversations. How can we prepare our bodies, our minds, our relationship for welcoming life? I mean, I think when you do birth work, and certainly to the degree where you are, Nathan, I'm sure it can be so easy to feel like the weight of how much work there still is to do. But these conversations just remind me of like, this is it, and it's happening. Like, look how far we've come. It's truly, truly, truly incredible. Yeah, just incredible. I actually would just love to hand it over to you, Nathan. I feel like you've got some good stuff to share. Response to David, yeah.
David's pretty complete. I'd be curious, if we took a pause and said, just elicited maybe any questions that people have, so we could maybe go deeper into some of these topics, because there's quite a bit that's been said. So maybe we could do that. Otherwise, you know me, I can talk for hours. Give a white man a microphone and he'll go.
Victoria, may I just say something about what David said
Yes, of course.
before we accept Nathan's proposition? I would be rather careful about asking fathers to be, what are you excited about having a child? Because that's really leading the witness. How can you possibly, in response to that question, say, well, actually, David, I'm rather frightened by it, or I dread it? I think that we have to be open to some negative reactions, or certainly, if not negative, then certainly fearful or anxiety-ridden responses. So I would suggest that it would be better to just ask fathers and mothers how they are feeling about the pregnancy, instead of feeding them sort of the answer, oh, I'm so excited. So I think that it's important to leave those kinds of questions open-ended, rather than, suggest the answers.
I can add to that as well, Dr. Verney. I actually think that's a really good stepping stone towards, some other things. And this is a topic that very recently kind of came up for me in my counseling, is that most men, appreciate what we're saying. You're supposed to be excited. You're going to be a dad. What a great opportunity. What's my role? I want to play baseball with my son, or whatever, or my daughter, like whatever. That's all the stuff that I think we're expected to feel. But a lot of men have a deep apprehension about the process, especially the birth itself. So if I could, share another tool for those listening, whether you work with pregnant couples or preconception, couples with fertility challenges or whatever else, this topic of home birth is coming up, and it's becoming a really, really challenging piece for a lot of men. And a lot of women reach out to me and they say, my husband, he's great, he's supportive, he's doing all the things that we're talking about, but he's really, really scared of this home birth thing. Mm. And one way to address what a man's maybe true apprehensions deep inside, the things that, we talked about with the conscious stories, the thing that he's maybe worried about, but he's not expressing. Sometimes that'll unfold if he can acknowledge his own birth story. And we can get as metaphysical or esoteric as we want here, but very, very practically speaking, what story was he told about what his birth meant to his mom and dad? And that subconsciously, I mean, we've got like a renowned psychiatrist here. What does that subconscious story, how does that play out in our own experience of birth? So another exercise I have to, and I have people on Instagram reach out to me like 10 times a day asking about home birth. Sometimes is home birth safe? I'm not going to address that one here. Of course, your baby's most likely going to be fine if born at home, as are you. But the real question there, the follow-up question often is, well, if it's safe, how can I convince my man, the father of my child, to go along with this, because they're like really stuck in this medical model. And what they're expecting me to say is, well, here's the data and this and that. But the data only gets us so far. If a person's lived experience is telling him, that has been narrating to them that this process is potentially catastrophic, and there's an illusory safety advertised by the hospital, many men feel more comfortable being there. And here's why. When I started asking men to go and ask their mother and father their birth stories, they were starting to reflect on, oh man, my whole life I've been under this impression that giving birth to me, my mother experienced such pain and such hardship, and there was so much suffering there, and there was such a hard recovery, and I was such a fussy baby, and my body was so big I ripped them from front to back. This was what I heard, probably as a 2-year-old, because my mom was just telling the story of how hard my birth was. But that became a part of this unconscious story that I was being told about birth. And it wasn't until, I went to obstetrics, guys. Like we got to keep people safe, right? I got surgical steel, I've got pharmacies, I've got blood banks, I've got all this stuff that can keep you safe. But there was something deeply ingrained in me that told me that this is not a safe thing. And so we better be in hospitals, because that bad thing might happen. And thank God we have surgeons and all this other stuff. But here's what happens when a man starts to hear his birth story. He can now acknowledge, oh my gosh, I have always had this experience with birth, which was reflected in my mother, the person I love the most, if we're going to be Freudian about it. And I harmed her, I injured her, I made her bleed, I made her suffer, I caused her pain. All of that stuff was a part of me. And I was bringing that now into my work. I was bringing that into my own pregnancies and in our childbirths. And without recognizing what story I'd been told about my own birth, and not acknowledging and then helping to reframe that story, maybe even having my mother retell me the story, focusing on how it was amazing. We tried so long to have a baby, and then you were there, and it was so amazing and beautiful, and you smelled so great. And yeah, it was painful, but it was also like rapturous. It helps me like reframe this, that I don't actually have to be afraid of this. But until I was able to acknowledge my own story, I had no idea where those percepts or the precepts were that were leading me to believe that this is not a safe thing. So for what it's worth, if anybody out there, encounters this in your friends, family, maybe with clients, maybe with yourself, if you're feeling like some sense of dread or doubt or apprehension, go ask your parents about your birth story. And sit and be present. It's a first exercise in presence. Just be still and give them full permission to tell you everything that they remember. And then maybe write it down, and maybe work on rewriting that with your parents. It might even be healing for your mother 65 years later, or however old you are.
So glad you spoke to that, Nathan. I was going to ask you to. Awesome. Yeah. And that's actually that's the meat and potatoes, as they say, of my work. You can check out Transcribing Living Memory. It's on my website, where we go through the revisiting of your own birth and pre-birth experiences, but not only that, the re-imprinting. It's so, so, so important. It's why I think everyone who's been through the Transform into Birth series has gone on to birth naturally and peacefully in the comfort of their homes. It's literally the opportunity of birth, the power that birth, it holds the power to heal and transcend any and all that came before it. It's in fact designed to do just that. So when we become coherent with the stories that our bodies are holding, especially as women. Our bodies are what has to open in order to give birth one way or another. Those experiences are coming through. But then dads, yeah, his capacity for presence requires his coherence. I always say it's not if those birth memories comes up, it's when and how. And they'll almost always be unrecognized when they show up in the room. Barbara Essman, my elder and mentor, is here. And on the 25th, she's actually offering a masterclass. I'll be hosting it on the importance of healing your own birth in preparation for giving birth, or the key, you know, that plays in having a blissful, peaceful, sacred birth. So I highly recommend registering for that if you want to know more about it. Great. Wow. So we could keep going, but let's open this up for questions. So you can put your question in the chat. I'll also scroll through. You can also say this one's for Nathan or this one's for Thomas, or we can just ask and who feels drawn to respond. And so from Kira, I'm curious, what do you guys experienced about IVF pregnancies and conceptions where there may be no dad, when there is an anonymous sperm donor? Can a mother on her own or with her partner get connected as mother and dad in some way? If whoever feels to respond to that, Nathan or Thomas, yeah.
I can chime in on this one. So we've talked a little bit about safety and the role of the father in helping to co-regulate the baby, but what about co-regulating the mother? I think that's really at the kind of the heart of this, is that when you're going this alone, you don't necessarily have that anchor. And the good news is that your nervous system doesn't know the difference between whether it was a man that impregnated you, quote, the old-fashioned way, or if this was a sperm donor or whatever else. I think because of the range of the myriad of unknowns, right, with regards to the energetics. I mean, gosh, guys, we don't even know where babies come from yet. We don't even know when life begins. You know, the heart's not even pumping and we have circulation of blood. Like there's all kinds of mysteries around the egg and sperm thing. And the notion that there's one egg and one sperm and that's the magic fix is, I think it's actually baloney. I think it's actually a cooperative effort amongst the follicles to select one egg to be released in a cooperative effort amongst the sperm to ensure that one of those sperms is accepted by the egg. I think that there's a whole different philosophy that we could look at. But with this question, I think the primary thing that I think is important is that there are a lot of women who have a traditional partnership who still don't feel safe in the experience. I mean, meaning their nervous system doesn't feel like there's a threat. I don't mean safety. I mean, earlier I had said birth, there's nothing safe about giving birth, but I wasn't talking about the physical. I was talking about in any true rite of passage, death is on the line. It's an initiation. An old version of you is dying and a new one is being reborn. There's nothing safe about that. It's like taking a big old dose of mushrooms out in the jungle. There's nothing safe about that. Yeah, you're physically going to be okay. You might vomit a little bit or whatever. But if you don't do that with the right set and setting, with the right guide and moderator, you potentially could wreak havoc mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And it's no different for the birth experience. So let me start by saying that. And then let me also say that what I mean by the nervous system feeling like there's not a threat around the corner, that sense of safety in the external environment in order to make sure that the physiology of childbirth, I don't like the term, but we'll use it because I think everybody can relate to it. The physiology of childbirth is able to unfold in the most natural way possible when there isn't a threat around the corner. And that can be actually provided by anybody in the room, or it can be to the detriment of somebody in the room. So as the pregnancy is continuing, yes, there may not be a father figure, so to speak, that is doing the things that we're talking about. But surrounding yourself with people who are putting you at the center and reassuring you and providing you with whatever it is that the type of support that you as your unique self needs in order to get the sense of not just empowerment, but also this sort of sense of safety is actually very, very critical for even the physiology that we want to unfold in the childbirth experience, especially when you're in labor. So you might, I've had clients who ask the man, the husband, who isn't quite there yet, second pregnancy. This happened just recently, actually, for them to not be in the room because for whatever reason, they hadn't invested in their relationship sufficiently that they felt like that masculine figure was going to be the anchor for them. Instead, it was their mother. And it's no different. Your nervous system will still respond, for better or for worse, to the environment that you set, the people that you have there throughout your pregnancy. And I've had women who are in this exact scenario have the most beautiful births possible, and their babies are so well co-regulated. And there isn't even a masculine figure in the room. In fact, I'm the only masculine figure, and I have to step out of the room because my masculinity is sometimes just too much for them, if for whatever reason makes them feel less safe or whatever. So I step out of the room, and whenever I start hearing some I'll pop my head in, and if I'm needed, I will step in. Otherwise, it's kind of like a free birth. So I hope that that answers the question, but I think it is a really, really good one. I think it's a really good question that really kind of tests a lot of the things that we've been describing, because there's a lot of less traditional ways that babies are coming into the world. And it's not like it's right or wrong. It's just it really kind of, I think, compels us to all take responsibility for how we make women feel safe in the world.
Victoria, I'd like to share an anecdote that really lines up pretty well with Nathan was saying around this. After I first put my book out, and it says right in the subtitle, "The Modern Man" is right there. I had a lesbian couple reach out to me and ask, like, "Hey, David, like, we kind of glanced through your book. This seems like it might be helpful, but do you recommend this for us?" And I was like, well, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I'm speaking from my experience to a specific audience, but I'm curious too. Like, let's give it a shot. And like anything else, it's a cookbook. Try a recipe. If you don't like it, then throw it away or try a new one. But I would love to hear your experience. So we stayed in really close conversation throughout their conception, pregnancy, and then early childbirth and early parenthood journey. And the non-pregnant partner and I were in pretty close conversation at various points in times. And what she shared with me that they found super valuable was the specific that her being the supportive partner and showing up with that attention, with that care, with that concern, with that investment all along in the pregnancy journey for both her partner and their baby was super powerful. And that was the learning for her. So, in resonating with what Nathan was saying, it can be about dads, it can be about the masculine, and very massive percentages of time it is, but it really can really come down to the dynamics and the felt connection investment from the supporting partner or immediate family or whoever your birth team is, your sister, your mom, whoever. As long as everybody benefits by having attention, energy, care, concern, compassion, awareness, love, and there's different wavelengths and frequencies and channels that can flow. But generally, the more, the merrier. And I think that kind of circles back to our original starting point of this question: what's missing from the culture? Our larger culture, and again, I'm in the US, I'm speaking to the US culture of the modern world that we live in here, is that there isn't this sort of focal point on the family and pregnancy and childbirth as the center point of the culture's continuation. And to the degree we can recenter that and celebrate pregnancy and have a supportive network that is encouraged and developed and subsidized, or whatever the word you want to put into play here, to really feature the pregnancy and the baby's arrival as the tremendous miracle and the universe's expression of continuity that it is, with its rightful centerpiece. in the family and in the larger culture, I think all of that love and care concern is really the most important component. Its flavor, its wavelength can be a secondary thing. It would be my response to that.
Thanks for touching on that, David. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. I think I want to make sure that we understand what we are talking about. We are talking about in vitro fertilization, which is different from artificial insemination, right? So in vitro fertilization, the fertilization actually occurs in a Petri dish, in a lab. So what we have here is some sperm and some ovum, and they are made to mix and eventually unite. So when you think about that and you compare that to a regular conception and pregnancy, I mean, how would any one of us like to be conceived in a Petri dish as opposed to by two real feeling human beings? And I think that the fact that this conception occurs in the lab will have psychological impact on this child. I cannot see how it wouldn't. And there is some research, not a lot, but there's some research to show that in vitro fertilized babies have many more psychological and medical problems when they grow up than other people. Whether they have any sort of memories of this is still debatable. There is a psychotherapist, a psychologist in Switzerland who has treated quite a number of in vitro fertilized children who have had problems, emotional problems, and they seem to be able, by play, sand play, and playing with dolls and other things in his consulting room, they're able to relive the actual point of conception and some of the problems that occurred as a result of that. So I'm not a great supporter of in vitro fertilization. I can understand why for some people it would be really important to have a child, but I think that those people who are so eager in having a child should really look at very closely at the reasons why they want to have a child, because there may be a reason that they're not having a child. There may be a very important unconscious reason or even a physiological reason why they're not having a child. And so I would definitely not rush into in vitro fertilization or support it unless the people involved are very well sort of looked at and examined, not examined in that sense, but spoken to about some of the things that I have just related. So I have sort of thumbs down on in vitro fertilization.
I can chime in here too. Personally, I'm also one of those guys who's like, on the one hand, there's a lot of couples where this is really the only way to do it. I have close family members. There's a lesbian couple. A lot of other types of scenarios arise in which IVF is perhaps the only way. And our assisted reproductive technology industry is eclipsing $2 billion this year. So on the one hand, yeah, I think sometimes this technology is super helpful, but we are shunting people to the REI doctors who are making way more money than probably all of us combined, as a consequence of nobody really doing the work for couples who would otherwise prefer to conceive naturally. And I do think that there are long-term implications, not even, I mean, look at just the pregnancy complications alone. I do think that there's some psychic roots of disease that are going to start unraveling in the next 30 to 50 years as a consequence of our over-reliance on ART. And so it's a great tool that should be used once in a while, I think, and then we have a lot of work to maybe do on the back end, based on Dr. Verdi's books and his research and whatnot. But our sort of replacement for the natural process where there's a conscious coupling of two individuals, inviting the soul of this baby in, being loved when the glimmer of in your eye starts twinkling, that you want to have kids. That is a very, very different process from the nearly, gosh, it's probably going to be close to 25% of couples that are utilizing ART to some degree, either IUI, which of course is less, I think, invasive, so to speak, to this sort of astrality of a baby. And so our over-reliance on that is leading to a lot of long-term issues, I think, including perhaps the psyche of the child. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. I just think we need to at least acknowledge that this is not a replacement for the natural conception process from the standpoint of the long-term mental, emotional, and physical well-being of a child.
Yeah, this has to go. We can't go without mentioning all of this. I mean, it's like with cesareans, if cesareans were only happening when they were absolutely needed, I don't know, Nathan, like what would less than 0.5% of births be cesareans? Or I don't know what the actual statistic is, but yeah, we really need to look closely at this. And Diamond Weinstein wrote a book. She was the first to do this first ever research on women's lived experiences through assisted reproductive technology. And yeah, it's just a huge realm of unknown. You're absolutely right, Nathan. I totally agree. There's a whole cascade of conditions that we are not yet aware of that are going to inevitably come about. We have now conceptions that are introducing multiple epigenetic environments, and we don't know what that looks like when these humans are 50, 60, 80, 90 years old. But I think that we better get really well trained in pre and perinatal dynamics, because like the way we're born informs the way we live, informs the way that we die. This is sacred birth wisdom, and it will continue to represent. And when people like myself are helping humans to revisit their own births, it comes with this, it's a substantial level of humility and not knowing. Like, I don't know what it is like to come out of the womb with forceps. That wasn't my experience. I don't know what it's like to be vacuumed out or to experience this break and enter that is a cesarean. I don't know what it was like to be frozen for months or years before I was implanted. I don't have that experience. And it is absolutely already mind-bending that we go to practitioners, doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, somatic, all the things when we're sick. And the question of what was going on when you were born, or how were you born, or what was happening in mom's life when you were, like, those questions aren't being asked. And that is total testimony to how amateur we are in recognizing these fundamentals of what is literally like, what were the building blocks? Like, if something goes wrong in a house, you get to know the materials that it was built with. Like, oh, we use cedar. Okay, let's get some cedar, to fix repairs. But yeah, no one's asking these questions. So this is really big. At the end of the day, I just to add one thing, and I'll get to your question here, Mark, before we close. But one thing about the assisted reproductive route that I would bring in, that is, if you are choosing that route, remember that no matter how conception and pregnancy is unfolding, ultimately, you are the architect of a whole human being. And ideally, babies are conceived in love with oxytocin galore and gestated in that sea of connection and love and intimacy, and born in that flood of ecstasy and intimacy. And, that birth is a celebration of love. That is the ideal. But when those hormones aren't going to be present, and if you're aware that you're actually going to do things that are going to remove those hormones, then talk to your baby. Talk to them truthfully. Like, we're doing this, and this is why we're doing it. Like, be honest with your kids from the beginning. If you just want to speed up the process, be honest with them. Let them know, you know what? We don't want to wait. And you'll learn in your experience that life actually does happen in perfect timing. But this experience is not going to teach you that. Or even though we're using synthetic hormones and you won't be bathed in that elixir of love, know that you will be loved. In fact, we love you so much. We want you here right now. We just can't wait to have you in our arms. So doing that, sending already, connecting with that petri dish, get those feelings and emotions moving inside of you. Ultimately, that's what's informing our babies' beliefs about whether or not they're loved, whether or not they belong, whether or not they're safe, whether or not they need to do something to deserve love or what. So yeah, this is a conversation about love, and we want to create humans who have a maximum capacity for it, so that they don't need to invest all the thousands of dollars like we're doing, trying to remember who we are, why we came, all of that. We want to keep their wholeness intact from the very beginning. And at this point in our understanding of trauma and human health, we don't have excuses. Like, we have more than enough capacity to do that. We can be honest with our kids. That's what we needed from our parents. We just needed people to be truthful with us, so we could grow with a discernment of like, what's mine and what's not mine. Well, that is good for that. Mark, so we'll put these two questions in and then we'll close up, because this has been so incredible. And we reach our time, but Mark says, since we're in IVF process, could you please point me to some of the research sources you're referring to? So is that for Thomas Verney, Mark? And he says, and although I'm not happy about having to resort to IVF, humanity may actually be forced to rely on these reproductive technologies due to continuously failing fertility over time, So yeah, is that in terms of the research, the sources?
Yeah.
Nathan, Thomas?
Yeah, the research that was mentioned, I think, by Thomas, pointing towards, future psychological and medical issues with IVF children. And also to that, I mean, for me, I just want to share this. It's really a struggle, because I've always resorted to everything natural, and would not have dreamt of ever having to resort to IVF. It's difficult hearing this, to be quite honest. And I know it's been a talk or discussion also in any previous sessions that I've attended in a similar audience. But the more I think about it, the more it also probes my thinking about what is nature and what is not nature. I mean, everything that a human can actually do, you could consider nature. I mean, nuclear fusion, you could even argue is nature, because a species on Earth is able to create it. It's not a view that I had before, but I know it becomes very philosophical, but also in the end, nature will have a way of balancing things out, I believe. So the issues that we're seeing now, I think that over time, and I'm really thinking about like over 100 years, etc., going forward, we will evolve into human beings that are able to overcome any imbalances that that may be created by choosing reproductive technologies such as these. And thank you very much for this session. It's been very, very enlightening. I really appreciate it.
Well,
Yeah.
I think Mark deserves a response from one of us. I think we've all heard those arguments, and the fact remains that, I've had people call me up, and I'm not like a guru for anybody. I don't do the fertility work the way that I used to, but I was finding women coming to me with a very, very low, like AMH. They're like, what do you do differently? I'm like, well, I went to the best IVF, to the best fertility doctor in the world. And it's like, okay, did you get pregnant? Well, then that wasn't the right approach. I'm not really sure what to say, but maybe we try something else and we see what happens. And after a couple, maybe about 6 months of working, their AMH, which I've been told by the Harvard geeks, can't go up. It's just going to keep declining. Will triple or quadruple over time. Now, I'm not saying that couple will necessarily get pregnant. But what I am saying is that it's a bypass for us to say, hey, if it's a human creation, it's still natural. Philosophically, we can make that argument, but the reality is that a baby that's born by C-section, which is also natural based on that argument, is not going to be the same baby that's born at home vaginally. It's just not the same. It's not a philosophical argument. It's factually inaccurate to say that's the same experience for both babies. Now, every baby also has a contract that they came in with, and perhaps academics wouldn't agree with me on this, but I've heard enough interesting stories around soul contracts and babies choosing to come through the abdomen because there was a history of sexual abuse that woman had suppressed. And in a regression therapy with a psychiatrist, it turns out that at 3 or 4 years old, they were molested violently. And they had suppressed it so much and had no recollection of this happening until the regression therapy, where they actually, these memories had come up from their childhood. And as a part of the therapy session, they were in the womb with their baby, and the baby was indicating, I can't go through there. It's too scary there, Mom. This is after the C-section. I know it sounds woo-woo, but they were there. They had this experience. So what am I supposed to say to that? And they actually got quite a bit of therapeutic benefit trying to appreciate that this baby had some say in this. So if that is true, if that could be true, then it could also be true that there's actually a direct experience lived by this baby from the moment that they decide that those are going to be my parents. And they may have chosen to come through IVF. That's not like a good or bad thing necessarily. But we have to just realize that maybe all the spirit babies are driving us towards a more technological way of getting pregnant. We can argue that, but the fact remains that when babies come through, naturally conceived through the vagina, it's a very, very different, likely a very different experience than that baby that came through in a different way. We have twins. I attend vaginal twins. Go figure, right? Like, wow, that's not supposed to happen. One baby comes out vaginally, one baby comes out by C-section. They have very different immune systems. One baby was not covered in bacteria and all the poop and stuff that is a part of pregnancy. There's nothing sterile about it. That baby that comes out by C-section has a very, very different experience. So the point here is we obviously don't know, but I think we should not bypass some of the really beautiful sort of natural laws that have allowed us to kind of live here on planet Earth for so many years. And if we do evolve, hopefully that's going to be okay for us. It's probably not going to happen in our lifetime, but I would love to see the literature, but I also have had enough conversations with women and men who've been on this journey to realize that there's something a little bit less measurable here about this whole thing. And just because a baby is born doesn't mean that baby is thriving in the way that they would 100 years ago. So I'll just leave it at that.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's here, who chose to be part of this conversation. I feel like this is true activism, if there is any such thing. that we're having this conversation speaks volumes. Thank you, Dr. Thomas Fernie, for being here today, for giving your time, your energy, your heart, and everything that you have given over these 50, 60 plus years. I hope that it has given to you what it has given to all of us to be here today and share your voice and your wisdom. Thank you so, so much. Nathan, thank you, brother. Thank you for all the ways that you're showing up in the world. I can't even begin to imagine the energy that you've put in through your training, your learning, your unlearning, and that you still show up as a father to your wife, to your babies, and engage in this process that is unfolding in your life, giving so much at the same time. Thank you for being part of this conversation and saying yes when I just spontaneously threw it out to you. David, thank you so much. Thank you for being here, for being a yes from the very beginning. Thank you, Barbara Essman, for introducing me to David and his amazing work. It's just absolutely brilliant what you're all doing. You inspire me. And in moments like this, I want to say so many things, but I find my body language just wants to go into this deep, deep bow. I think choosing parenthood is one of the most sobering decisions that we can make. And I see this kind of conversation as a living prayer. May we all envision a world where everyone is mothered and fathered. Imagine the politicians who are well fathered. Imagine the choices that will be getting made and the quality of our economies and our societies and all of it, our healthcare systems. Like, we don't know these humans who are coming in now, but I believe that they are coming to teach, to lead, to heal, to innovate, and they need parents who are deeply in love and can welcome the fullness of who they are, getting out of the way as much as humanly possible to let their story emerge. Thank you all so, so much. We'll send out the replay. Feel free to share it with your loved ones. And if you want to learn more about Transform into Birth, the birth preparation series that is rooted in the healing and re-imprinting of your own birth and pre-birth experiences, then book a connection call with me. I'm happy to have a chat. Also, please explore Nathan Riley's work. It's outstanding. What he's building is beyond impressive. The Born Free Method, and get your hands on David's book. You guys will also be directly linked to their work and their courses and offerings through the Transform into Birth library if you access it. So thank you all. Blessings. Happy spring. And until next time, thank you, thank you, thank you.